My name is Leela Hadid. I'm 31 years old. When I was 25, my mother stood up at my sister's baby shower in front of 63 women, aunts, cousins, church friends, co-workers, and said into the room without a microphone, just her voice carrying the way it always did when she wanted to be heard. God only gave me one daughter worth celebrating. She was looking at my sister when she said it. Everyone laughed like it was a joke. My sister laughed too, her hand on her belly, her head tilted the way she did when she was being charming. I was sitting in the corner near the gift table, the chair they'd put me in, because someone had to manage the ribbons and the trash bags and keep track of who brought what, and I felt my face go completely still. I set down my paper plate. I picked up my purse. I walked out through the side door of my aunt's living room in Mississauga, and I didn't come back, not for 5 years. Then, 8 weeks ago, my cousin texted me 2 sentences. Your sister is in the hospital. It's not good. They didn't elaborate. They didn't have to. What they didn't know was that I'd spent those 5 years becoming someone that house could no longer reach. They didn't know about my condo in Halifax, my position at the firm, my Saturday morning runs along the waterfront, my therapist, my life. They definitely didn't know that the sister who'd stood at the center of every room our family ever occupied had fallen so completely that I would be the only person left who actually showed up. Let me take you back. The Hadid family. A semi-detached house on a cul-de-sac in Mississauga, Ontario. Brick front, 2-car driveway. A backyard my father raked every October without fail. My father worked in civil infrastructure for the city. My mother ran a catering business out of our kitchen that by the time I was 12 had become something real with actual clients and actual invoices. 2 daughters. From the outside, an industrious immigrant family that had done everything right. From the inside, a system with 1 sun and 1 moon, and the moon was expected to be grateful just for proximity. My sister was born in 1990. I came along in 1993. 3 years apart, a different planet of experience. My sister was the one with the voice, the grades, the ease in rooms. She won a regional science competition at 15. She graduated top of her program at McMaster. She got a full scholarship to do her MBA at Rotman. My parents drove to Toronto every parents' weekend. My mother brought food in containers, enough to last a week. My father shook hands with professors like he was confirming an investment. I graduated from a college diploma program in paralegal studies. My mother once described it at a dinner party as something practical for now. She didn't mean it unkindly. That was the worst part. She genuinely believed it was a compliment. I started keeping records the year I turned 16. Not out of strategy, out of survival. Something to make the feeling into a fact, which felt safer than just carrying it around. I counted how many times my mother asked about my sister's courses at dinner versus mine. 11 to 2 on average over 4 months of tracking. I counted how many times she interrupted me mid-sentence to answer my sister's phone call. 23. I wrote it in a spiral notebook I kept in the back of my closet. Numbers felt more honest than feelings. Numbers didn't need anyone to believe them. The baby shower was in April 2019. My sister had gotten pregnant in her 2nd year of marriage to a man my parents had approved of immediately. A structural engineer with a house in Oakville and a clean credit score. My mother had been planning the shower for 4 months. She'd hired a florist. She'd had the invitations printed. She'd coordinated with my aunt on the canapes, the cake, the little individual favor bags tied with ribbon that I had spent 2 evenings assembling on my parents' kitchen table without being asked. Just because I could see my mother was overwhelmed and I loved her, still. In the way you love someone who has never fully seen you. The shower was at my aunt's house. 63 guests, champagne punch, a dessert table, a slideshow of my sister through the years that my mother had put together herself. I was there early to help set up. I arranged the gift table. I sorted the name tags. I refilled the punch 3 times without being asked. When the guests arrived, my mother introduced my sister to everyone with a warmth I recognized from the outside, the way you recognize a language you once tried to learn. She touched my sister's hair. She laughed at things my sister said before my sister finished saying them. She introduced me to 2 people. One says, "This is my other one," and once by name, correctly, but without stopping walking. The toast happened at 2:40 in the afternoon. My mother stood in the center of my aunt's living room holding a glass of punch, and she said how proud she was, how this baby was a blessing, how God had given her a daughter who exceeded every hope she'd had for herself. And then she said it. "God only gave me one daughter worth celebrating." The room laughed. Not cruelly. They thought it was self-deprecating. They thought she was being funny about herself, about her own imperfection as a mother, the kind of joke women of a certain generation make. But I was in the room, and I knew which daughter she meant. Everyone who knew us knew. A few people glanced at me in the half-second after, the kind of glance that looks away immediately. I sat still for 3 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my aunt's mantel. Then I got up, got my jacket from the coat closet in the hall, and walked out through the side door. My mother followed me to the driveway. I heard her heels on the paved stone. "Where are you going?" "Home." "You can't leave in the middle of." "You just told 60 people I wasn't worth celebrating." In front of me. Into a room. She made a sound, exhaled through her nose. "I was being funny." "You know that's not what I meant." "What did you mean?" "I meant your sister is the one having the baby." It was about her. Everything today was about her. "You're making this about yourself." I looked at her. She had punch still in her hand. "It's always about her," I said. She stared at me with the expression I knew, not anger, impatience. The look of a woman who had a party to get back to. "Leela, don't do this today." "Okay," I said. I got in my car. I drove north on the 427 until the city thinned out, and then I pulled into a Tim Hortons parking lot in Brampton, and I cried for 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my dashboard and I needed something concrete to hold. I bought a medium coffee I didn't drink. I drove back to my apartment in Etobicoke that night and I sat on my kitchen floor for a while, which is something I used to do when I was trying to think. Not the couch, the floor. Tile. Real. I blocked my parents' numbers when I got home. Then I blocked my sister's. I changed my number 3 weeks later. I deactivated my Facebook. I took myself off the family group chat. I removed every family follow from my Instagram and set it to private. I did it systematically, over one Sunday afternoon, the way you'd pack up a room you were leaving for good. No drama, just the quiet of a door closing on its own weight. I kept 2 people. My cousin, who had texted me at 3:14 the afternoon of the shower. That was disgusting. I'm sorry. And my friend from work, Gwen, who didn't know my family at all and liked it that way. The year after the shower, I applied for a position in Halifax at a mid-sized legal firm that was expanding its paralegal team. I got it. I packed my car in February 2020 and drove 14 hours in 2 days. Nova Scotia plates by March. My own apartment on Barrington Street, 700 square feet, $1,200 a month, a view of the harbor if you stood in the right corner of the living room and tilted your head. I painted the bathroom a deep slate blue the first week. No one to ask, no one to tell me it was a bad idea. I started therapy that spring. Every other Thursday, a woman named Dr. Forey who had a calm office near the waterfront and asked good questions. First session, she asked what brought me in. I said, "I need to figure out how to stop waiting." "For what?" "For my family to understand that what they did had weight." She wrote something down. That was the beginning. I got promoted to senior paralegal in 2022. Salary went from $52,000 to $67,000. I paid off my OSAP in full in March 2023. I sat at my kitchen table with the confirmation email open on my laptop and I cried. Not from sadness, from the specific feeling of something being entirely and completely mine. No cosigner. No help. Mine. I made real friends. My neighbor from down the hall, Cleo, who knocked on my door in the middle of a snowstorm in 2021 to ask if I had a can opener and stayed for 2 hours because we started talking about something and couldn't stop. My colleague Bastian, who covered for me once without being asked and became the kind of person I'd call in an emergency. My friend from my running group, Diane, who never asked why I didn't go home for Christmas and never looked at me like the answer mattered. In 2022, I dated someone. A man named Frederick, a high school history teacher, 34, calm in the way that certain people are calm, not because they've never felt anything, but because they've sorted through it. He lasted about 10 months. Not badly. Just timing, and the fact that I was still in the middle of something I hadn't finished. He said once, near the end, "You say sorry before you need something, every time." I brought that to Dr. Forey. We spent 4 sessions on it. There were still places my family had gotten into the foundation of me that I was only now finding. By early 2024, I'd sealed most of it. I had a job I was good at, friends who were real, a blue bathroom, a Saturday morning running route that took me along the harbor at a pace that felt like something close to peace. I had started forgetting them for stretches that got longer every year. I thought I was done. Then, on a Tuesday evening in October 2024 at 6:47 in the evening, while I was eating leftover lentil soup and watching a documentary about the St. Lawrence Seaway, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. A 905 area code, Mississauga. I almost let it go to voicemail. I answered. Leela. My cousin's voice. "I'm sorry to call like this. It's your sister." She'd been admitted to St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto 3 days earlier. A mental health crisis. My cousin's words, careful and deliberate. The longer version came in pieces over the next 10 minutes. My sister had been struggling for 2 years. Since 2022, her husband had left in early 2023, a separation that had been quiet publicly and catastrophic privately. She'd been managing her consulting business alone after that, the one she'd built off the back of her MBA, and she'd been managing it poorly. She'd lost 2 major clients. She was behind on the mortgage on the Oakville house, and she hadn't told anyone. She'd been performing fine for so long that by the time she couldn't anymore, the fall was very far. Her daughter, my cousin said, "She's 4. She's been staying with your parents since Saturday." I didn't say anything for a moment. "Your parents are—" My cousin stopped. "They're not talking about what's actually happening. Your mom told your aunt it was exhaustion from overworking. Your dad told someone at the mosque she was taking a medical leave for a minor procedure. They're covering it." My jaw tightened. Of course they were. "She's been asking about you," my cousin said, quieter. "Your sister." "The nurses said she mentioned you twice in one of the intake interviews. She thinks you hate her." "I don't hate her. I know. But Layla, your parents told her you'd moved away and lost touch." That's the version she's been living with. That you drifted, that the distance was mutual. I set down my soup spoon very carefully on the counter. "They told her it was mutual." "Yes. She thinks I chose not to be in her life." "Yes." I said I needed a moment. I put the phone down on the counter and stood in my kitchen, looking at my blue bathroom door down the hall for about 45 seconds. Then I picked the phone back up. When I blocked my family. Did she ever try to reach me? In that first months before I changed my number? My cousin was quiet for too long. "I think she mentioned once that she'd tried emailing you. Early on, she said you never replied." "I never got an email from her." "I know. My old email address, my parents had the login. They managed it for me when I was in school and I never fully changed the password." I stopped. "She sent something and they deleted it." My cousin didn't deny it. The silence confirmed it. I called Dr. Forey's emergency line. We talked for 30 minutes. She asked me the question she always asked when I was at a crossroads. "What do you owe them?" I said nothing. "Then what is this about?" I was quiet for a long time. "It's about whether I can go back there and stay myself." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. I already knew what I was going to do. 4 days later, I called my mother. The number was 5 years old. It still worked. She answered on the 3rd ring, and her voice was the same. Measured, a little controlled. The voice of a woman who had already decided how this conversation would go. "Layla, I heard about my sister," I said. "Tell me what's actually happening." What followed was 15 minutes of the managed version. She used words like resting and getting some support and a difficult patch. I interrupted twice. The second time I said directly, "Is she on a psychiatric hold?" A pause. "They're doing an assessment. Has anyone told her she needs ongoing support? Not just rest, not just time. Actual structured help? Your father thinks she needs family around her." That's what she needs more than family. She needs professional support, and she needs to not be lied to about her own condition. I kept my voice flat, not cruel. Flat. "Tell me something. What did you tell her about why I stopped being in her life?" Silence. "Mom, we told her you'd grown apart, that you'd moved away and things had naturally—" "That's not what happened. We didn't want to make things complicated for her. You were the one who left. We simplified it. You simplified it so thoroughly that she sent me an email I never received because you still had access to my account. And she spent 5 years thinking I didn't care enough to reply." A longer silence. "Did you delete it?" My mother didn't answer. Which was an answer. I pressed the phone against my chest and breathed. Then I brought it back up. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to fly to Toronto. I'm going to go see my sister. If she's willing to engage with a real support plan, I'm going to help her find one and follow through with it. You and Dad are going to contribute to whatever that costs, and her private coverage has a mental health rider, so this shouldn't be complicated, but you are not going to manage the narrative around her treatment. You're not going to tell people she's taking a sabbatical or resting or having a minor procedure. You're going to let her be exactly as sick as she is. That's the only thing I'm asking of you." I paused. "And you should know that I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because she is a person who needed her sister 5 years ago and didn't have me. Partly because of what you did. I'm correcting that, not for you." My mother was quiet for a long time. "We're her parents," she finally said. "I know. And 5 years ago, you stood in Aunt Fatima's living room and told 60 people that God only gave you one daughter worth celebrating. I was in the room. You remember that even if you've decided not to. So right now, you don't get to use 'we're her parents' as though it's a credential that hasn't been complicated." I paused. "Make sure her insurance documents are accessible. I'll call when I land. I booked a flight for the following Friday. Halifax to Toronto Pearson, 6,015 a.m., $214 round trip on WestJet. I packed for 2 nights. I texted my cousin, 'I'm coming.' She sent back a single word, 'Good.' I told Cleo and Bastian and Diane where I was going in broad terms. Bastian said, 'Text me when you're through.' Cleo said, 'Be careful with yourself in that house.' Diane said, 'You don't have to fix everything. You just have to show up.' I landed at 8:40 in the morning. I took the UP Express to Union and rented a car from there. I drove to my parents' house first. I needed to see them before I saw my sister. I needed to be in that house once before I went to the hospital, so I wouldn't carry the weight of anticipating it. The house looked the same. The brick front, the driveway, the garden my mother kept obsessively in the summer, brown now in October. A pumpkin on the front step that I recognized as something my niece had probably chosen. My mother opened the door before I rang the bell. She'd been watching for the car. She looked smaller. There were lines near her eyes I didn't remember. She moved to hug me, and I stepped past her and walked in. My father was in the kitchen. He stood when I came in. He looked older in the particular way men do when they've been worrying. Not aged exactly, but deflated slightly around the edges. He said my name. I said hello. I sat at the kitchen table and I didn't take off my coat and I made them tell me everything. The real version. It came out slowly. My sister had been hiding the financial stress since the separation. She'd remortgaged the Oakville house without telling anyone. She'd taken on contract work she couldn't sustain. She'd been managing her 4-year-old largely alone. Her ex-husband shared custody but lived in Calgary now. My parents had suspected something was wrong in the spring, but they had told each other it was stress, told each other it was adjustment, told each other that she just needed time. "You knew it was more than that," I said. You were trying to keep it quiet." Because a daughter in a psychiatric hospital doesn't match the story you've been telling. I looked at my mother, the same way an invisible daughter didn't match the story of the good family. You've been managing the optics so long you don't know how to stop. My father's jaw tightened. My mother looked at the table. I let the quiet sit. At the baby shower, I said, in April 2019, you told 60 women that God only gave you one daughter worth celebrating. I was in the room. I was sitting by the gift table. And I left. And then you told my sister I drifted away, that we'd naturally grown apart. And at some point, when she tried to email me, you erased it so she'd think I didn't respond. 5 years. She spent 5 years thinking her sister chose not to be in her life. And you let her think that, while she was falling apart. My mother's eyes filled. She didn't speak. I'm not here because I've forgiven you, I said. I'm here because she needed someone who would show up without making it about themselves. I'm going to see her now. When I know what she needs, I'll tell you what your part is. And you will do it without negotiation. I left them at the kitchen table. I drove the 20 minutes to St. Michael's. I parked in the hospital garage, $6 for 2 hours, and I sat in the car for exactly 3 minutes before I went in. She was in a room on the 7th floor, a standard room, window looking onto an air shaft. She was sitting up in the bed when I came in. She looked different in the way that people who have stopped performing look different, less put together, more real. She'd lost weight. Her hair was pulled back. She was wearing a hospital gown over her own clothes, a detail I noticed and couldn't stop noticing because it seemed like something she would hate. She looked at me for a long moment without saying anything. I sat in the chair beside the bed, not the chair across the room, the one right next to her. You came, she said. I came. Mom called you. My cousin reached me first. I called Mom after. She looked at the window. I thought you hated me. After the shower, after you stopped. I didn't hate you. I want you to understand that very clearly. I blocked our parents. I blocked you too. But I was in a place where I couldn't separate anything. I was just leaving, and I didn't know you'd tried to reach me. She frowned. I emailed you once. Early on, you never replied, and I thought, I know. I found out recently. They had access to my old account. Her expression moved through something I recognized from our whole childhood, that moment where you realize something has been happening to you that you weren't told about. She'd worn it differently than me. She'd always had more protection, but the shape of the feeling was the same. They deleted it, I believe so. She put her head back against the pillow and closed her eyes. We sat in quiet for a while. The kind of quiet that takes up space like a third person in the room. I need to ask you something, I said finally. And I'm not asking because I want an apology. I'm asking because I need you to understand what the last 5 years look like from where I was standing. I paused. At the shower, the toast, when she said that. I remember. You laughed. She opened her eyes. I know. I know you probably thought it was a joke. I know you probably didn't clock what she actually said, but I need you to know that I did, and every person in that room who knew us did, and I sat there and felt what it feels like to have your own mother announce to a room that you don't count, and then I left, and then 5 years happened, and I need you to know what those 5 years felt like from my side. She didn't look away. Tell me. So I did. Not the managed version. The real one. I talked for a long time. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment and then she said, I let them do that. I was so busy being the one they were proud of that I never thought about what it cost you to be the other one. I let it happen. You were also a kid, I said. And then an adult who'd grown up in the same system. You had a different role in it. It cost you things too, just in a different way. She looked at me. Do you believe that? I'm starting to. She looked at her hands. I'm so tired, she said. Not to me exactly. Just into the room. I know. I don't know how to ask for help. I've been the one who didn't need help for so long that I don't even know what the sentence sounds like. It sounds like what you just said. I had already spoken with the hospital social worker that morning. I had the name of a residential day program that took her insurance plan, an outpatient mental health program through CAMH that had openings in November, a family therapist who worked with parents of young children post-crisis. I had printed nothing because I hadn't wanted to walk in carrying a folder like I was managing her. But I had the information. I pulled out my phone and I read her the names. She listened. She asked 2 questions, both practical, about her daughter's schedule, about timing. I answered what I could. My parents, she said. They'll want to be involved. That's your call, I said. Whatever you decide about them, I'll respect. But I'm not carrying that decision for you. You get to decide what role they play in your recovery. Not them, not me. She nodded. Small. Like it costs something. I have one question for you, I said, and it's the only one that matters right now. Are you willing to actually do this? Not for your daughter, not for appearances, not because you're supposed to, for yourself, because you are worth putting back together. I believe that even having been absent for 5 years. But I need to know you believe it too. She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I thought the answer might be no. Then she said, I don't know how to yet. That's enough, I said. That's enough to start. She was discharged 4 days later into the day program. I stayed in Toronto for 6 days total. I slept at my cousin's house in Scarborough. I drove my niece to her junior kindergarten twice. A small person with her mother's eyes and her father's serious expression, who accepted me with the easy grace of 4-year-olds, as though aunts who appeared suddenly were perfectly normal. She called me by my name on day 2. By day 4, she was saving me the seat next to her at breakfast. I visited my parents once more before I flew back. I sat in the same kitchen. My father offered tea, and I accepted it. My mother sat with her hands folded. I told them what the plan was, what her program involved, what my sister had agreed to. I told them their job was to follow her lead on contact, to stop explaining her situation to other people in ways that made it smaller than it was, and to be available in the ways she asked them to be available, and not in the ways they preferred. My mother said, I know I've made mistakes. I looked at her. That's something to say to her, not to me. My father walked me to the door when I left. He stood in the frame and he looked older in the autumn light than I'd ever let myself see him. He said, I'm glad you came. I'm glad she's getting help, I said. That was all I had for him right then, and I let it be enough. I flew back to Halifax on a Thursday morning. I landed in the early afternoon. I took the bus home from the airport because I hadn't bothered with the rental car this time. Walked up the stairs to my apartment, put my bag down in the hallway, and stood at the window in my living room looking at the harbor, which was gray and cold and completely familiar. My blue bathroom was the same. My running shoes were by the door. I had an appointment with Dr. Forey on Tuesday. 8 weeks have passed. My sister and I talk on the phone every Sunday evening. For about 40 minutes, sometimes longer. The conversations are careful still, finding their way into each other, but they're ours, not performed, not arranged for anyone else's benefit. She's doing the day program. She's seeing a therapist twice a week. She's been working with a financial advisor to sort out the Oakville situation in a way that is honest instead of managed. She told me 3 weeks ago, I've spent my whole life being impressive. I'm trying to figure out what I am when I'm not impressive. I didn't have an answer. I just said, I think that's the whole work. My parents have sent 2 texts since October, brief, asking how things are. I've replied with the minimum, she's doing well. The program is good. My father sent 1 longer message saying they'd like to talk when I'm ready. I haven't answered yet. Not because I've decided not to. Because I haven't decided. And Dr. Forey taught me that not deciding yet is itself a decision. It's choosing not to be rushed by someone else's timeline. I'm allowed that. Last Sunday, my niece got on the phone at the end of the call. She told me she'd lost a tooth. She told me she wanted to come to Halifax because she'd never seen the ocean. I said, we'll figure it out. She said, okay, Auntie Leela. Like it was simple. Like it was already true. Dr. Forey asked me last week what I'd proven to myself through all of this. I sat with that for a long time before I answered. I proved that I could walk back into the thing that had broken me and not become it. I could sit in that kitchen, in that house that had spent years arranging me near exits, and I could speak clearly and leave when I chose and drive away and still know who I was when I got on the plane home. I could love my sister without losing the years it took me to build a life she hadn't been part of. I could show up without it meaning I'd forgiven everything, without it meaning the past had weight it no longer deserved. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing. People ask, sometimes in my own head at 2 in the morning, whether going back meant I'd somehow said what happened was acceptable. It didn't. I went back because my sister was a person sinking in water our family had filled the room with, and I was the only one willing to throw her something real. Not a managed version of concern. Not a story for people at the mosque or at the office or at the next family function. Something real. I didn't go home. I went to help someone escape a house that had never been a home, and then I flew back to Halifax, to my apartment, to my slate blue bathroom, to the life I built while they weren't watching and wouldn't have approved of and didn't need to. My name is Layla Hadid. I'm 31 years old. I was the other daughter. The one near the gift table, close enough to be useful, not worth the toast. I am not the other one. I never was. I just had to drive 14 hours across 3 provinces to begin believing it, and then 5 years of living quietly and completely by myself to finish the job. If you're sitting near someone else's gift table right now, handing out ribbon, being thanked with half a glance, I want you to know that proximity to someone else's celebration is not your ceiling. You are allowed to leave the party. You are allowed to build something of your own. And you are allowed when you're ready to go back and throw the rope. Not because you owe it, but because you know what it means to need one and not find it there.